Good evening. Welcome to the Cleveland Heights Committee of the Whole meeting. It's November 17th. And Addie, if you will go ahead and call roll, I'd appreciate it.
Cobb.
Here.
Petrus.
Here.
Larson.
Here.
Maddox.
Here.
Russell. Here. Bosch. Here. Sheets. Here.
All right, the first item on the agenda is labeled Planning Development Committee. This will be a 5-minute presentation few words from Ryan Porter of Impact, 5 minutes from Karen Knittel, who is Planning Development staff member, and then 20 minutes for Q&A from council. There is no public comment during this time, so I want you to understand that this is the time for the council to converse and have discussion about this very important topic. So Ryan, if you go ahead and start, I'd really appreciate it.
Okay. Where should I go? Down here? Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right, great. Oh, it came through. All right, I'm gonna cruise through slides really fast, if that's okay. All right, so I'll start while Addie pulls this up. Thank you everybody for having me this evening. Just a reminder of the schedule. We started recommended action plan. We're way down here near trying to get the zoning code done. And then eventually we're gonna work into tax abatement stuff early next year. I don't know, we can just scroll down, it's fine.
Oh, here we go.
Thank you so much. All right. Just kind of like remind everybody, we had a ton of meetings over the last year and a half. I gave a full summary in my submission. We can't talk about that today. Concept plan versus zoning, I think this is really important. So I want to be clear with the council and everybody that, yes, we developed a conceptual plan for the site, but that conceptual plan for the site is not what's going to get built exactly, right? So that's just a concept. The zoning is really what dictates what's going to happen going forward. So, this building A might not end up being shaped like building A, or it might not contain the same things as what we assumed is in building A. But the rules on block 8 will be set in stone, okay? So I just want to make sure everybody understands the concept plan is not necessarily what will be built. The different districts, so this is our regulating plan map. And this kind of really is the map that people look at when they go to develop under this new zoning code. I want to be clear that the zoning code is optional, right? So this zoning code sits over the S1 zoning that exists today. So if you're a property owner like the Medical Arts Building, you might stay with your existing zoning or you might opt into this new zoning. But of course, we're hoping that the incentives and the base of this whole zoning code encourages everybody to opt in. But there's no forced zoning here. We've kind of created 3 different density districts. So the core right here is SO1. That would be the highest building, highest densities. The next kind of purple color, and staff's comment was I should change the colors a little bit more distinguishing, which we will do. The next zone is SO2, which is again a little bit less density than SO1. And then as you move out, you can see on these borders of the single family home areas, on the east side and the south side, it's the lightest color. That's SO3. So that is the lowest density area. So that's like 1 and 2 story buildings, right? Because we're really right next to the 1 and 2 story single family homes right next door, right? So that's kind of the transect of how this looks. Dense, less dense, much less dense kind of thing. Okay. Sorry. We have all specific streets laid out. So these streets largely follow the infrastructure that exists on site, right? Because if we were to have to realign all the infrastructure on this site, the sewers, the water, the curbs, the drainage, right? We're obviously gonna have to fix a lot of it, but if we have to realign a lot of it, that would soak up a lot of capital that we don't wanna soak up if we can create a cool street grid without doing that. So we believe that the street grid still works, aligning it to the existing infrastructure, right? And each one of these streets, whether it be a B1 street or a C1 street or an A3 street, all have different requirements, exactly what the street has to look like. I'm not gonna get into them obviously today, but like this is an A1 street requirement. So when this street gets built, it has to be built like this with, cycle lanes, et cetera. This B1 street has to get built like this, right? So these are the street typologies. This is a pedestrian path that goes into one of the single family neighborhoods that exists today, right away. Civic space. So civic space is super important to any successful mixed use development. So how we wrote the zoning is that every development has to provide 10% of its site area
as public civic space, okay? So if you have a 40,000 square foot site, you'd have to provide a public civic space of 4,000 square feet. That could be, we have different types of civic space that you can build, right? A plaza, piazza, green, these types of things. You can buy out of 50% of that, but we're gonna make you build at least 50% of it. And if you buy out of your 50% at $35 a foot, that money then gets funneled to the city in a separate fund to help fund larger civic space or maintenance of civic spaces, right? So it gives us the ability to collect dollars to be able to build larger civic spaces. So development standards. So again, each one of these areas has a certain amount of height and site area you need to develop a certain amount of height, right? So, for example, I'll just use SO2, right, because it's the most prominent. SO2, in SO2, if you have 50 feet of frontage on a road and you have 5,000 square feet, you can go a minimum of 2 stories under our zoning and a maximum of 4 stories, right? Because it's a smaller site. But if you go all the way to 150 feet and 30,000 square feet, a much bigger site, right? Now you have the ability to do a minimum of 3 stories and a maximum of 6 stories. So your site area and your frontage along the site and which zone you're in dictates how much height and how much bulk density you can actually build, right? The uses are flexible. So maybe you want to put, instead of putting a residential use as I had thought right here with some retail, maybe it's good for an office, right? Maybe it's a hotel use, right? All the uses underneath the code, which is the next slide, are allowable, right, in certain districts, right? But they're not dictated to be on a certain corner or in a certain block, right? So there are some changes that are gonna happen to this as a result of the planning commission meetings. So, you know, for example, we're changing like religious and charity uses. We had originally said it's not permitted in SO3, but it is in SO1 and SO2. We're gonna make a conditional use for SO3 now. So there's a lot of recommendations from Planning Commission that we thought were really good around that. You know, single family stuff. So there's a series of changes which you have in a packet of yours, which are noted where each change is as to where those changes are going to occur.
Ryan, how much more time?
Well, I think this is important. So total threshold. So we've set a total threshold for development of this site. That doesn't mean you can't do much less, and there will probably be less, but the total thresholds are 2,500 units, 175,000 square feet of retail, restaurant, and entertainment, 85,000 feet of office, 250 rooms, 50,000 feet of arts and culture, 75,000 feet of institutional, civic, and educational, and 50,000 square feet of light industrial. So those are the max ranges, not just, you know, what's gonna happen, right? So that someone would have to come back. And that's it. I'll stop there.
Sorry, I was rude to you. I apologize.
You're not rude. I know you only had 5 minutes.
Yeah.
13 slides, 5 minutes.
Karen Knittle's gonna represent the staff.
So the good news is, having Ryan go first, there's some things that I was gonna say that he's already said, and I will not restate them. There are some things though that we did just wanna discuss, and we're really happy and excited to be talking about zoning. You know, we've been planning, we're a little bit of zoning geeks. And so just to remind everybody, the current zoning is S1, and part of what the parcels that we're looking at are also zone A, single family. So that they would both be included in the overlay zone, and it's an optional, so they can choose to become a part of the new overlay zoning, or they can keep operating and having their uses under the current zoning code. So Severance is the heart of our city, and we really do believe that it's important that we move forward and look at rezoning in order to see a development here happen. So we have a website, just for everybody to remind you, that includes some of the preliminary reports and studies that the MPAC people did. They created their recommended action plan and also their full application for this map request, as well as rezoning is on there for residents to see. And it does include the outline of the many public hearings they had. This is the important slide to just remind everybody about where we are in the process, because zoning changes are regulated by section 1119. And so there's specific steps that we have to do. So the first step was the council introduced this at the planning session, and they referred it to the planning commission. The planning commission graciously heard it on their last meeting in November, just last week. And they I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but they did make a recommendation so that this public conversation could continue to move forward. This is tonight's meeting number 4. Number 5 is a planning and development committee of the council. That's not required by our zoning code, but it's an important step the council wants to take place. That's going to happen on November 19th. The planning commission is going to continue to review this code and will further discuss it at their December 10th planning commission meeting. There is a public hearing scheduled by council on December 15th, and there's the possibility, depending on what public comments come in and how council views and hears those public comments of some action that night, or there's, I think, agreement that there would be a special meeting in December to consider this case. So planning commission, as I said, did review this at their November meeting, and they heard a presentation from Impact staff, heard public comment, and they saw this as an important to the city's future, and they understood the complexity of the zoning changes. But planning commission expressed some consternation at having to review this in just one planning commission meeting. But after a significant discussion, the planning commission members recognized the desire to continue this public conversation, and that its recommendation was necessary for the city council to hold a public hearing in December because of a state regulation, because of state law. So in order to facilitate, the planning commission did approve a motion to recommend to council to consider both ordinances 226 and 227. So that's the zoning map change as well as the zoning text amendment with specific recommendations. They're here on these charts. I'm not going to go through them. Some of those Ryan has talked about. We do have them posted online for anybody to see under the action steps. So on our planning commission case page, we always post actions of the planning commission. The planning commission's recommendation, as well as all of their current comments, are attached to that final action. And so it's visible for the public to see. A lot of what they talked about, as Ryan said, we talked a lot about uses. And so as he said, we changed some uses from being permitted to conditionally permitted. There was a proposal for a data center. The planning commission felt that their understanding of data centers was that would be a completely misuse and wrong use for severance. And so they asked for it to be removed, and the applicant did agree to that. So there's a real collaboration going on, and all of council received by email an updated version of this chapter 1149 with notes as to what the planning commission changes were, as well as what we had one of our attorneys take a look at it. So sometimes there were just typos or formatting changes. As Brian said, we thought the map should have colors that are easier to see. So some of the recommendations in there were that, some were more substantial. So planning commission approved this, but they did make it clear that they intend to continue their conversation and make further recommendations to council. They specifically wanted to look at parking, civic spaces. Sorry, I'm trying to remember what else it was. And I'm remiss, I should say that our planning commission chair, Jessica Cohen, is present in the room. So she can correct me if I missed something. So civic spacing, parking, some general standards they wanted to take a look at. So again, there's information online. This planning commission meeting lasted 4 hours. All 4 hours are posted on this YouTube watch site. So if any of you want to watch it, it's good discussion, and you can see how hard our planning commission members worked to move this forward and to really understand this complex code. It's complex but important information. So this is just, again, the zoning map change, which we've kind of talked about. Over here you can see the overlay. These green areas are actually the areas that are currently green spaces. They would be conservation areas where no building would take place. And then you can see just the overlay where applicants or property owners could opt into the code, or as I said, they could continue operating their property under their old zoning, whichever that might be. So the zoning text amendment has 2 attachments. Attachment A was the chapter 1149, which Ryan just briefly reviewed with you. Attachment B is really us taking a look at our zoning code, the balance of it, and updating it. So some of the updates included actually reviewing our definitions, adding definitions specific to the form-based code, but as well as cleaning up our code a little bit. It was supposed to be alphabetical. Over the years, it got a little bit out of order. So we tried to straighten that up a little bit. There are some specifics, sorry, I'm trying to go fast. If I'm talking too fast, tell me. There were some specific things that we looked at. So the district standards map had to be updated to include the new chapter 1149 and the severance overlay zone. Let me just see what else I had to say. I think one of the important things under administration, we looked at how the severance area is managed in terms of land use. As you know, currently there's a Board of Zoning Appeals, there's a Board of Control that gets called as needed to hear cases that were in the severance S1 zoning district. And this summer, some of you will recall that we had a great difficulty in getting a quorum for a couple cases, and they got delayed a couple months in order to get that to go forward. We thought there was benefit in taking a look at how severance is managed and are recommending that it be managed like all the other zoning districts in Cleveland Heights, that we have a published zoning code and that gets managed by staff, the zoning administrator, as well as planning commission, who would review those individual issues that need to come for review. So the red line then includes all of that information. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but you can ask me questions. Again, just to remind you of the dates, because that's so important. I'm not going to go through any of those because we've heard them a couple of times. They're posted online, but that's so important. We wanted to put it in the PowerPoint presentation. And then just again, where you can watch the planning commission case and the regulating plan. I think it's important to remember that form-based code is different from Euclidean zoning, in that the form-based really looks more at the character of place. It regulates the use as opposed to regulating the use. So it's really looking at the street design, the form of the building and how that public civic space is being utilized, as opposed to organizing everything under a use. So again, we have a form-based code brief YouTube tutorial posted online too on the Severance Town Center redevelopment page, and we'd encourage you to take a look at that if you need more information about that.
Thank you very much, Karen.
I did that very
Appreciate
quickly so we can get to questions.
You will have other opportunities, all right? So,
Okay.
thank you. I want to begin, first of all, to make sure that we all know that Vice President Russell is holding a meeting on the 19th at 10:30 in the morning. But we're back to 11 now?
No, it's at 10:30, but the zoning portion will be at 11:45.
Okay, I am assigning ordinances 226, 2025 and 227, 2025 to the Planning Development Committee. And Vice President Russell will have at least an hour, I saw on your agenda, for us, that if you can come to that meeting, the council can come to that meeting and ask questions. So tonight's just a beginning. I also want to make sure that everybody here is hearing and seeing that this is a change in the schedule that council is requesting. And for the public, please refer to an updated schedule for severance redevelopment on the city's website. So again, we're mentioning that calendar. It's really critical everybody understand where you have the opportunity to speak and get your questions answered. So at this point, I'm going to open it up for a few minutes to my fellow council people and see who would like to ask a question. Councilor Petrus.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if it's best for Ryan or the staff to answer this, but looking at the zoning map, I see that there's a buffer zone. And so it appears, and I went to Google Maps to sort of compare it. It looks like maybe aside from the Staunton, what's labeled as Staunton Road Extension, all of the other trees will be preserved. Is that generally correct?
Yeah, generally, there's a 150-foot buffer zone from the rear of the single-family home properties to where anything can get built. And then we also preserve the existing trees that exist kind of like between like where kind of the telecom building is and kind of Metro is, like those existing trees up there. So all of that is buffer.
Okay, so our understanding is that aside from this extension.
Yeah, which
all of
exists
the other-
today, by the way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's two right of ways that exist today, one that goes,
Great.
to the east and one that goes to the south. We're preserving both right of ways and we're just changing the design of them. Commission, one of the comments they actually made was one of them was gonna have exit only vehicle traffic.
Okay.
Commission wanted to remove that and make both of them pedestrian only.
Okay.
So that's a change.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else?
I'll wait till Wednesday.
Okay, the question was raised at the planning commission meeting about moving this schedule back to when a new administration is sworn in. And so I'd like to ask Mr. Porter, because this is really important for your timing,
Sure.
is that a reasonable request or whatever your reason is that we really should try to get this done in December?
Sure, I mean, my perspective on this is that, we've been working on this for 9 months at this point. And while I realize every detail of the code has not been published till the last month or so, I would say that all the main components of the code that I've talked about have been talked about for quite some time in public meetings that I've held, right? I don't know, I can't profess as to how granular each and every member of the public is gonna wanna get. Like, do they wanna debate whether it should be a 4-foot sidewalk on an A street or a 6-foot sidewalk on an A street, right? So I look at, staff to be more in the weeds of that kind of stuff. It's critical for me to try to get this done this year because I have committed to NAMDAR, who you guys aren't committed to, only I am committed to, so I understand that. I have committed to them that we would get this piece of the equation done this year. I will tell you that without us working through the tax abatement process with you guys in the school district, nothing's gonna get built. So we've still got a lot of work to do over there, right? But this is a zoning code and I think it's a really good code. I think, this same type of zoning code is one nationwide. So we're not kind of reinventing the wheel here, but we are applying that wheel to a place like Cleveland Heights. So I'd like to get it done. I know there's not huge changes in the government structure going to next year necessarily of people, but the reality is that when people come into office, they may need time to get settled. And I've been working with this group for quite some time, right? So I'd love to get this piece done with this group and then bring in the new year with the new council to get the next big piece of this equation done so that we can kind of try to stay close to our targeted timeline of end of 26, beginning of 27 groundbreaking.
President Larson. I heard what you said, that was the first time I heard that. Are members of council that wanna pause this? Did I miss that part?
No. At the meeting, planning commission meeting, the point was raised that perhaps it'll be better to wait until the new administration is sworn in.
Oh,
Yes,
okay, I just want clarification because it makes absolutely no sense at this point. If he's been communicating with us and meeting with us to start that
well,
clock
I
over
wanted
unless
to
there
make
was.
sure that you all
And
hear
so-
that because
Okay.
I watched half of the meeting of planning commission and haven't finished the other half yet, so,
Okay.
And I wanna be clear to the public, I will spend hours with anybody, right? So like, this is not a, hey, you don't get a chance to spend time with me to understand this or make comments or come up with ideas together. Like I will spend the time necessary between now and the end of the year with anybody, everybody.
And
So,
if that came off wrong, I apologize.
No.
It didn't make sense for me
Yeah,
for
no.
her to have a meeting if we were gonna put it off till next year.
oh,
For two of us to sit there and ask these questions, that's why. I just wanted to make it clear what that timeline was for everyone. Or what needs to happen and when, because that would have been a tremendous waste of your time to do that.
I do have a question about, you talked about this form of the rezoning has been successful in other cities. Is there
Yeah.
one city that I can look at where you use that,
Sure.
utilize that rezoning?
New Rochelle in particular is where it won an ABA award.
Okay.
But we've written the same code in 4 cities, or towns or villages, they're all kind of different. 2 on Long Island, 1 in Westchester County, and 1 in Rockland County, New York. Very similar codes. Obviously different densities and heights, right? Some were only 3-story communities and some were 48-story communities, right? But the point is that a form-based code can be tailored to the appropriate form and design of any community, right?
I missed a date. Is it expected that we're gonna vote on this before the end of the year? At least that is where this is.
Under the current plan, yes.
And-
We might
and-
have to have another meeting on December 17th to finish it up.
That's what I was getting at. Okay.
Yeah.
And that would be an evening meeting on the
Yeah,
17th?
Addie's put it on
6
hold,
o'clock,
it's in your email box for you to see.
Okay, I saw it today. Now I understand what the topic is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? Council Petrus, go ahead.
With regard to the roads, I've heard a couple people wonder who would be responsible for paying for the construction of them.
Sure.
Could you add some detail there?
So we are definitely responsible for building the interior roads. The circle is currently owned by the city. I
I don't know that we've talked at all about who's paying for any of that, right? So that is part of the same conversation that we need to have about tax payments, right? Because there's gonna have to be TIF probably financing related to the infrastructure piece of this. So like, I want to set up a structure, if we can get through the zoning, where we have what's called a New Communities Authority Act that's put over this site. There'll be a board that runs that. It's similar to places they've done this in other locations close to here for these types of developments. And that board kind of runs the site, and that board is kind of like a land development corporation and has bonding capacity, right? So the city and all of us and the school district would agree to how any sort of CRA tax abatements would work. The NCA can run sort of TIF. And the goal is to make sure as much of the bonding capacity is held and serviced by the development and doesn't go on your general obligations. But there's a lot of numbers to work through with that, and it's a three-party discussion between me, the city, and the school district. So I don't have an answer for you. My gut tells me that we probably won't need to float some TIF money to do the ring road, right? But that the developers themselves will build the interior streets as they build. That's my gut. We did the RAP because we did all this investigation on like the sewers and all this stuff, and we've got about 1 million gallons before we hit a bottleneck on the sewers. So we've got some time on that. But what I want to do is when we form the NCA, we can also create fees, right? So I want to create a fee structure in the NCA with all of you where developers pay fees into the pot that can go towards things like infrastructure improvements or social issues or whatever it is, right? So it's a combination of like how much tax abatement is needed, how can the places of taxes that are getting paid that are new, right? These are new taxes, funnel towards servicing debt for infrastructure and fees for fixing things, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Okay, I am going to thank, Jessica?
Just one comment from the planning commission, if that's okay.
Yeah.
It was a 4-hour meeting.
I know.
And we were only able, because we were hitting everybody's bedtimes, only able to go through the most prominent portions of the plan that we wanted to go through with a fine-tooth comb. Those are the changes that we conveyed to council, but I wanted to reiterate on behalf of all seven members of the commission, we are planning to go through the rest on December 10th. And so our hope is that you will take, even though we had to move it forward to continue the conversation, our hope is that the recommendations that we work out at that meeting will be taken as the same as the ones that came before the recommendation, because we do plan to go through everything in the proposal.
Committed to 4 hours again?
I hope it will go quicker, but we've been there later. We were there till 11, we've been there till later before, and
And thank you and the commission for that work, and the staff for taking it out, and the people that were in the audience as well. So at this point, I'm gonna say thank you, Mr. Porter, I appreciate you so much. Thank you, Karen Knittel, and I'm gonna move on to the presentation that is going to be done by Burgess and Burgess. Oh, hi, there you are, I was wondering where you were.
Good evening, my name is Vanessa Tay Iosu, I'm with Burgess and Burgess. She's gonna load a PowerPoint, but I also printed out some copies because I thought it'd be easier to take note or to refer to when you're asking questions. As she's pulling that up, just as a means of introduction, my name is Vanessa Tay Iosu, I'm the president of Burgess and Burgess. I've been with the firm for 25 years. The firm has been in business since 1983, and we work with municipalities, school districts, community colleges all over Ohio to better connect with their constituents. This process, and I'm gonna move quickly through this. I'm not going to go through every slide because I wanna give you time to ask questions, but I'm not gonna speak as quickly as the others because I just feel like I wanna make sure that we have time to talk about what we need to talk about. So in terms of our purpose and our scope, our goal was to better understand the perceptions of the community on form of government, priorities, and what we should be looking towards in the future. Our process is an action research process, which means that as we gather qualitative information, we make adjustments to policies, procedures, and discuss that on an interim basis with the staff that we were working with. So that you're not waiting for the entire process to finish to start implementing recommendations. You're making recommendations as you go because time is of the essence and the best time to communicate something is yesterday. So our process involved conducting interviews, internal interviews with department directors, assistant directors, and supervisors. We conducted 21 interviews during the span of time that included February 11th to March 6th. The timing is important here. And we completed 21 interviews using an open-ended guide meant to start conversations. We also talked to 21 community opinion leaders, nonprofit, education, business, all different sectors of the community. And this was cast from a wider net of 107 community leaders. We worked with the communications department to put together a list of the folks who we want to hear from, the folks we hear from, some who are positive, negative, or neutral. And again, meant to just open up conversations and get them to tell us what they believe the city's strengths are, what the priorities should be moving forward, especially as it relates to communications and engagement. The timing on this one is also significant because that happened between March 6th and April 12th. And there was a major shift in what people were seeing in the sphere, a tumultuous time in the city's administration. So the tone of those interviews shifted. We also reviewed communications methods and practices. We worked very closely with the communications department, conducted a media scan, looked at 2 years of media coverage to determine the tone and the breadth and the topics that the media covered. And we worked through that time to also advise the communications department on how to increase coverage on the topics that we want to be covered. We also did a best practices study among peer cities that also moved from a city manager to mayoral form of government to see how they navigated that change, especially as it related to outward communications and engagement. We talked about quite a few things, and these are the main takeaways. Again, I'm not going to talk about every single one of these, but in the internal depth interviews specifically, while people believed that the city was moving in the right direction and they had a lot of hope and optimism around some of the planning and the economic development efforts, there was a lot of report of being understaffed, some burnout, some low morale. They talked about the budgetary dispute between council and the mayor, and it hurt their ability to plan, make decisions, and also personally more on them. And while we talked about things like capacity and issues that might be impediments, they were very, very hopeful, and especially as it related to the communications department at the time, the new leadership, which was Jessica Shantz at the time, was seen as a major highlight. But they also talked about ways to improve communications, and they really wanted to shift the focus from what was being covered at the time in the media and was chattered about locally to talk more about what the city does and its impact on the community and the pride and positivity that people had moving forward. Some of the things that they talked about were siloed communications, and they really wanted to see more cross-departmental meetings, using digital tools, more collaboration and transparency, and really thinking about how to reach beyond those usual audiences with an eye towards those underserved populations and ensuring equity across the community. The depth leader interviews were a little bit different, especially because they took place during a time that was a little bit more high profile in the community. There was a lot of division around the overall direction of the city, how things are going. They talked about the news of the time really hampering the city's ability to improve, grow, make progress. And while they said that they believe that there was better communications now under a new form of government, especially around the new, at the time, communications director, new back again, there was a lot of frustration among community leaders on basic city services, except for garbage. Everybody was raving about garbage, but some of the other things like roads, potholes, leaf pickup were a source of frustration. And they believed that there was an overall negative value proposition when it came to their taxes. They paid more than they believed they received in city services, which is not unique to cities in Northeast Ohio, but it came up a little bit more in these interviews than we've seen in other communities. And they really were also very hopeful when it came to economic development and had a lot of praise for it. This is just a slide that I left in the presentation so that you could see that sometimes when we talk about these topics, we talk about the trouble points, but there were also a lot of really positive things that they talked about, the connection to the city and the times that they felt prideful and then they believed that they belonged in a community like Fluka Place. Just a reminder that things aren't always sad, but when we are doing these depth interviews, people often look for some of the things to improve upon instead of focusing on the positives. They mentioned some basic recommendations like improving city services, stabilizing staffing to ensure that there's enough coverage and resources. They talked about investing in King Park, but also making sure that infrastructure and recreation facilities didn't fall behind. But there was a lot of discussion around collaboration with other community groups, with schools, small businesses, libraries. They wanted to see more connectivity, not to engage with those organizations, but to engage with the people in those organizations. They also wanted to see an updated city master plan so they could understand the overall vision of the city, so they could buy into that as well. And they did ask for more transparent two-way communication. A lot of them expressed frustration when it came to response times. If they contacted somebody at City Hall, it'd take weeks or months for a return call. They weren't sure often if their call was ever going to get returned. So this is just a really brief look at those depth interviews on some of the communications best practices. We looked at some cities that we believe are communicating well with their constituent groups. So we kept them in Ohio, so those were Grove City, Brunswick, and Grandview Heights. We covered the big topics like the organizational structure, how they work with other departments, what a strategic communications plan should and could include, how they collect the data to communicate back, reach into audiences, and then how to ensure that employees were trained, especially around social media practices, and then developing other tools and resources. This is a series of recommendations. This is a really abbreviated version of a very long report, but I wanted to make sure you saw some of these top line things on just creating structure around the department to ensure that there was updated timely communications, not just internally, but externally as well. And a lot of it did involve really using data to guide things like social media and newsletter content, but making sure too that you have enough staff and resources. Staff and resources, if you notice, comes up quite frequently in almost every part of this research. So it's a nice cross check to be able to see it through each of the data collection tools. I don't have to read all of these to you, but I just wanted you to see some of the top lines of that. And then the best practices of those peer cities that are, I wouldn't even consider them peer cities because they're really all over the place. There were not a lot of examples, as you know, of communities that shifted from a city manager to a stronger form of government. But really this was kind of an interesting study of Doral, Florida, Vernon Township, New Jersey, Snohomish, Washington, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. So we did literature review, but we also talked to the mayors of those communities. And so obviously some of those topics are seen through their lenses, which may not be the same way the community would view them. So that's why we looked at literature as well. And some of the things they talked about are things that we've grappled with, like clarity of roles, not just between the mayor and city council, but within those departments on how they communicate with each other, and the different ways that different communities created constraints such as council approval for appointments, spending and intergovernmental actions. They talked about formalizing dispute resolution mechanisms so that things don't end up getting mired in gridlock. And a little bit more discussion on division of power. But they really, really stressed the importance of stakeholder engagement during the time of transition, because people tend to only hear the parts of turmoil and not the things that are working well. And so that can create a lot of dissatisfaction in your community, but also just does not give people a lot of faith in how government can and should work. So these are opportunities to make sure that you're not just talking to public, but your staff on a really frequent basis with, again, opportunities for two-way communication, streamlining teams, a transparent budgeting process, and then here's, big shocker, right? Collaboration between council and mayor, being deliberate and intentional. But again, this was all meant to make sure that we have multiple ways of ensuring that we've covered every base as we're thinking about how to improve engagement with the public and staff. That was me going quickly, but not running as fast as the others.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
But if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Anybody have questions about the presentation? Councilor Fox.
I don't necessarily have a question, but I want to thank you for coming here and clarifying the project. This has been on our minds. We've been very concerned as a council. There's been a lot of politicizing, I think, done of this, which has been regrettable. But it's very helpful to see your output and what you guys have come up with, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're really proud of the work we've done. This included my entire team and there's a lot of data behind these very short slides, so.
Counselor Cobb?
Couple of questions. So you've given us a summary. I'm assuming there's a detailed report,
There are multiple detailed reports,
and collectively, how many pages would you say that is?
probably close to 100 pages of reports.
When were those reports provided to the city?
They were provided on a continuing basis. So the first one I believe that we completed was the peer studies review, so probably early spring. And then the communications was a little bit after that, so maybe March, April. And then the final report on the interviews was June 1st.
Okay. Can we get the entire report posted on our website?
I think that's a good idea.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Maddox?
I just wanna thank you again for coming in, bringing clarity to this. Like Councilman Posh said, this was politicized, and I just wanna apologize for how your firm was discussed and how this was brought about. The transparency, the professionalism that you guys showed along with our communication staff was very clear to me this entire time. And I just wanna make that clear to you, and I apologize for some of the communication and how things were handled in formulating community in public, but it's clear that you guys did great work. And I'm so glad that the public gets to see this and that this is all out there and transparent for everyone to see. This speaks to both your organization and the people who work here that were working alongside you to get this work done, as well as the outside leaders who made this happen. There was nothing political about this, and I really appreciate you standing flat-footed here and being able to express the work that you guys did in such a professional way, considering how you all have been handled. So thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Vice President Russell?
Yes, you stated that you interviewed 21 directors
21 directors, assistant directors, and supervisors.
and 170 leaders or?
21 community leaders as well, but the list was 107 community leaders.
Oh, 170.
So we contacted 107 community leaders, we completed 21 interviews. And
Okay,
the usual response rate for something like that is usually 10%, so we were at 25%, which exceeds industry standards.
okay. Did you interview at all any just regular staff outside of directors?
No.
Okay, and what about just random residents?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Posh?
Were the interviews done anonymously?
We obviously, our interviewers knew who they were, but the responses were all kept confidential. So while we know the categories, you know the categories of the people who responded to the depth interviews, the actual respondents are confidential.
Thank you so much, and as they've already stated, thank you so much for this work.
This wasn't for her. I just realized the connection to this. I didn't know if the communication director wanted to share any information. I just realized in conjunction with this while they were talking.
Do you have
I
anything,
just didn't
Director
know.
Shantz?
I'm just so pleased to have an opportunity for Vanessa on behalf of Burgess and Burgess to come and share this good work. All along the way, they were giving us information that was immensely valuable that we have started to implement, and I'm really excited to implement in 2026. Especially, and I hope everybody gets to dig into it, the peer city comparison and all of the best practices that came out of that review. I intend to use it as we build our comms policy and procedures handbook. And I think it's gonna be immensely beneficial to our city as we move forward.
It does look like there's a good roadmap for you here, for all of us as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Councilor Madden?
No, just.
Oh, all right, okay. Thank you so much, and
Thank
have a
you.
great evening.
Thank you. I have to put a little one to bed.
I'm gonna go on to the legislative review, the next part of the committee of the whole. We'll be starting with ordinance number 230, an ordinance to amend certain subparagraphs of ordinance number 011-2025 relating to appropriations and other expenditures of the city of Cleveland Heights, Ohio for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2025, introduced by Mayor Kuda. We do have Mr. Unetti, we have Director Caldwell here. Director Caldwell, would you mind just going through briefly those line items that are in this adjustment, please? In the spreadsheet.
For the 2026 budget, are we looking at?
Oh, no, this is
Okay,
the
sure.
adjustment we're doing.
Okay, sure, yes. So
we submitted it's 2 items on the adjustment for planning. The first is 248,000 and there's 2 line items on the 1 page. 248,000 that consists of Kane Park, ADA ramp, the project management is 10,000, ADA bathrooms, again, project management. Denison Park for $1,824, and last but not least, no building supports, and that's just the estimate of 217,000. Those items total 248,000, and that will be coming from cash, general fund. The next, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to also add that I received an answer to one of my questions that for the Kane Park items, the budgets from ARPA were fully utilized for construction. So there was necessary project management costs for both projects that weren't properly budgeted.
Yes.
Yeah. So 10,000 for the STRAMP for the GPD and 20,000 for city architecture to serve as the owner's rep in the design build ADA bathroom project at Kane Park. So those additional items. Let the record show that Law Director Hannah has returned from vacation.
Just this moment.
Thank you. Any questions? Counselor Cobb.
Madam President, I don't recall us ever approving the Stramp construction contract that was more than $1 million. I couldn't find any legislation on that. Could someone double check? Maybe I just missed it. I saw that we approved the construction management agreement last December, but I could not find an approval on the contract that went to Fabrizi.
I think the public improvement contracts typically are approved by council for bidding. And then the mayor, after that point, can select the lowest and best bidder.
Okay, but then did he need to come back to city council? Okay.
No, and that's consistent with how those contracts are always handled under the ordinance.
Okay. That would explain that. Thanks.
Counselor Petrus.
Could we receive a little more information about the nobility court set aside?
Yes, I can work with planning to get something to you.
Okay. Does anyone happen to know what that is?
I would defer to Brian Anderson, he may have some detail about that.
As far as like
The increase.
specifically, like what, as far as what it's used for or?
Yeah, information about it. We just have a line here that says nobility court set aside, City of Cleveland Heights, $216,000.
If you recall, when we sold that property to PWG, that represents the sale price.
Okay,
And that was just the money that then, you know, it was discussed at the time to be set aside for future reinvestment or something
into the
in that
neighborhood.
area or along that corridor.
Thank you.
There's no current plan.
There's nothing in place or even in the works for that money.
Thank you.
This just formally takes the accounting and puts it where it needs to go.
Yes, so we don't lose track.
So it's not an increase in anything of the 217,000.
No, I mean, that was just, that was the money realized from that transaction, so we're just making sure we are putting a marker on it for a future use in that area.
So does it get lost in that?
Go ahead.
Can someone explain to me the Blanche Avenue Grant Fund expenditure for the 159,000? I know we've had a lot of the Blanche residents come in to talk about what's going on over there, and we have not really heard of an update. And I was just wondering, when I saw Blanche Avenue, can someone give us some explanation on that?
So we just concluded the 15-day comment period for the notice of intent to request release of funds and the finding of no significant impact. So right now we're compiling all the public comments and we'll be submitting them to HUD at some point this week. And there's another 15-day public comment period for people to make comments to HUD about the project. So after that, and assuming they've released the funds, then we're able to pay for engineering and our environmental consultant for the work that they've already done for this project. So that's where we're at, we're limited right there. I don't think there's any plans to go beyond that until council's gone through its process.
So are you saying there's public comment due for HUD regarding this project?
Right, so there'll be a 15-day public comment period in addition.
15 or 50? Oh,
15,
okay.
in addition to the 15 that we just completed for on our side.
And then
But
once
usually
you,
it's about, for HUD, it's usually about process, that's what usually people would, that's something that would disrupt them approving funds.
so once that's the 15-day public comments from HUD, then that's when you will go with this 150.
Yeah, that'll be public and you'll see how, you also, so anyone that commented will receive a comment back from the city. And then it'll be included in the submittal to HUD, and you'll see that if you go to HUD's,
And this is to start that project?
to start the process of releasing those federal funds so that we can begin to pay the consultants that worked on the project.
Councilor Petrus?
Could we receive those comments that the city's received? Thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands raised, I'm gonna move on to resolution 231-2025. An ordinance authorizing the sale of K-9 Officer Dodo to his handler for the sum of $1 and declaring necessity that this legislation become immediately effective. Chief Britton, I'm so happy to see this happen with these animals that have served us well. And especially I've met K-9 Dodo and he's a grand dog, so I hope that he has the best retirement ever.
Yes, ma'am, I know he will.
Cause he gets to go home with somebody he knows.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, anybody have any questions or comments? All right. You wanna make that comment or no?
Yeah, so 232-2025 is going to be removed from the agenda this evening, just so that you all are aware, so I will not be reading that one during our meeting.
Resolution number 233-2025, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with Sosick Painting and Remodeling LLC, a certified lead abatement contractor, for the use of Lead Safe Ohio grant funds in connection with the abatement of lead-based paint hazards at permanent parcel number 681-11-011, providing compensation therefore. I am really happy to see this, especially since there's a daycare on this property, so does anyone wanna elaborate on that, or does any councilor have a question? Okay, resolution number 234, a resolution confirming the mayor's appointment of Helen Hertz as a member of the Community Improvement Corporation of the City of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Any comments or questions? We're getting into quite a few appointments here that Councilor Cobb has put together, done the work in his admin services meeting, so I thank you for all that work, Councilor Cobb.
You're welcome.
Resolution number 235-2025, a resolution confirming the mayor's appointment of Linda Strasky as a member of the Community Improvement Corporation of the City of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Resolution number 236-2025, a resolution appointing Natalie Davis as a member of the Fair Practices Board to fill a vacancy for the remainder of an unexpired term ending December 31st, 2026. Councilor Cobb.
I just add, all we're doing, she is an alternate, and so we're moving her into a regular slot. And then Gary Benjamin is who we've recommended to then become the alternate to fill. In all of these cases, they're filling unexpired terms.
Okay, so resolution number 238-2025, resolution appointing Muhammad Irfan as a member of the Climate and Environmental Sustainability Committee, City of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Resolution number 239-2025, a resolution appointing Rachel Moore as a member of the Citizens Advisory Committee, the City of Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Resolution number 240-2025, a resolution authorizing an agreement with Serpentini Chevrolet of Strongsville for the purchase of 4 Chevrolet Equinox EVs for the Planning Development Department and Communications Department, waiving competitive bidding. I do have a couple of questions on this one. We did purchase 3 electric vehicles on a previous resolution earlier this year, and that was from a voucher from the AECBG voucher program. Now, these are 3 vehicles being purchased under the NOPEC fund grant, plus a replacement for the EV that was damaged. Is the NOPEC grant separate from that voucher that we used earlier this year?
Yeah.
And then, why is it necessary for this one to be voted on first reading only? Anybody have an answer to that? Is there a deadline for the purchase?
We have a deadline to draw down those funds by November 30th.
Thank you, that's what I was looking for. Question. But Vice President Russell.
Are those the funds I indicated at the budget hearings that NOPEC had was waiting for us?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Okay. These are all first reading only. All of those above will be we're gonna ask to vote on it this evening. First readings only, there's one under that category, it's ordinance number 241-2025, an ordinance to make appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the city of Cleveland Heights, Ohio for the period of January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2026. This is for our budget for 2026. And please keep in mind that Councilor Posh has a meeting, Finance Committee meeting tomorrow, where he's gonna be talking about the budget, but certainly if you have any questions this evening for staff, please let us know at this point. Councilor Posh.
Can I ask, when is this when is your expectation on when we vote on this? End of November not end of November, but December 1st? The first meeting in December?
Or the 15th.
Just by the end of the year.
I need to say, I think the information we got from the city this year has been outstanding. I don't see any delay from my perspective, but then again, I'm one of 7.
Okay, these are second readings. Resolution number 224-2025, resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with CRT Inc., a Sourcewell cooperative purchasing vendor for the purchase and installation of precast concrete bathroom for Dennison Park. Director Gonzalez, would you just address us really quickly on why you chose this particular company?
Yeah, sure. Number one, I've used them in the past in my previous employment, and we've installed this about 4 years ago. And still today, 4 years later, they still look absolutely brand new and fantastic. So it's a great company. They're 100% turnkey, so they I believe they're located in Texas. They make these things on site in Texas, and then they bring them here on a big shipping container. Bring them. We prep the site. We get everything ready. And then they're just 100%, they bring them on a crane, drop it down, we hook up all the utilities, and they're turnkey, ready to go right away. So it's a great company. I have used them in the past. They're very reliable, and it's a great product.
A question for you, since you have been exposed to them before, are the compartments easier to keep clean? Everything can be readily mopped down and wiped down?
Yeah, 100%. Everything that they make inside of them is all concrete. And then they use really good paint that's washable and all that stuff. So you literally just go in there with a hose, spray everything down, and every compartment has a drain as well too. So they get drained down, and you're good to go. So it's very easy to use.
Thank you very much. Councilor Maddox, this would have gone to your committee. So do you have any comments on it?
No, just excited to see it come. Pumped about this. Thank you for this.
Okay.
I think it's a great start.
Where is it gonna be located at Dennison? Where you tore down the old
It's
building?
actually gonna be, so you know where the existing garage building is located right now?
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be behind that garage building over there.
Oh, okay.
Because included in the 2026 budget, if approved by city council, we have a top playground going on as well too, where the little rounded part is. So that will be located there, and then behind that, almost by where the residential houses are, that's where the restroom will be located.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Everybody else good? Okay. This is ordinance number 225-2025, also second reading, and ordinance amending Part 13 Building Code of the Codified Ordinances of Cleveland Heights to update the city's regulations regarding public notice for the Architectural Board review. Councilor Petrus, would you please share with us what your committee decided to do?
Yeah, so we discussed this piece of legislation during our housing committee meeting last week, and we were generally okay with it. There was some discussion about whether we wanted to potentially update this legislation so that there would be a requirement that for significant projects, people would still be notified. There would have to be some like definitions about what that is, what constitutes a significant project. But ultimately, what we decided to do was vote to return this to this body for discussion. We felt that it would be worthwhile to get this in place and maybe 6 months from now, reevaluate it and see, how it's going. And then maybe from there, have some additional clarifying amendments. But like I shared, we voted to return it.
Right? And at that meeting, Director Elmley was there, so he answered all the questions that we had and he was part of the discussion. He did stop in this evening to say if we needed to have him here, and we said we were good to go, so. And then for third reading, resolution number 214-2025, resolution authorizing a grant agreement with the Noble Area Business Association and declaring the necessity of this legislation become immediately effective as an emergency measure. Vice President Russell, do you want to speak to this at all this evening?
I think this has been knocked around a lot, so I believe we're ready to go for a vote tonight, correct?
I think that's right, but I would say, Madam Vice President, that I was out of the office all last week, and I was under the impression that the Deputy Director was sending an updated agreement with a couple of items that Councilman Cobb had suggested and which I discussed with Myra Orenstein. One of those is the use of Future Heights as the fiscal agent for the organization for the first 12 months unless they obtain 501c3 status first. The next is sort of importing from the revised code approach that we discussed in here at the last meeting, the slightly revised approach to related party transactions, which would require full disclosure to the board. Anyone who is an interested party, whether they're a director or member of the board of directors or not, can't participate in deliberations, can't vote, has to be approved by the board. There has to be a determination that supplies or services can't be obtained elsewhere for the same or lower cost. And it's already in the agreement that that's subject to city approval before making the purchase. And I think that language works. I think it's consistent with the discussions that we've had. There's language in the resolution that says that the agreement shall contain any terms, conditions, or other provisions deemed necessary or advisable by the Director of Law. I would put those in that category. And council's approval tonight would not authorize execution of an agreement that didn't include those, because I'm gonna make sure that those are in there. And then the last one is having to do with Heights Arts. I'm not certain of the amount of discussion that this got, but and the councilman may want to speak to this, but the concept, and I think this came up in the meeting 2 weeks ago as well, was that NABA would work with Heights Arts on the art installations that are provided for in the budget and in the agreement and scope of services, and would obtain that approval prior to the expenditure. I'm not sure if Myra has a thought on this. I'm getting a
We have no intention at the present time of working with Heights Arts.
Okay.
The information that I received from Heights Arts was that they had approached Land Studio, which they're working very closely with, and that Land Studio determined that there were insufficient funds for them to begin working with Noble, and that because of the timeline, that they could not handle it. And so, as of the present time, I'd rather we did not include Heights Arts in the draft.
Would you consider using another art assessment firm?
Absolutely.
Because there must be others out there as well, right?
Absolutely.
Because there's so many different blank spaces for the art.
Yeah, I mean, we are not opposed at all about having surveys done or having any groups look at Noble and determining best placement. But at this point in time, Heights Arts doesn't have the funding, and so we would be open to.
To piggyback on her question, what kind of budget was discussed, just curiosity, what would need to happen in terms of investment and amount to really get that? Was there anything?
Rachel wasn't specific with me about what would be required, but because of the size of Noble and the sheer background that would be required in order to move forward, Land Studio immediately said it wasn't possible.
Okay. The only reason I'm asking is during the course of the conversation over the last couple of months about Noble and some of the feedback that we've gotten around community engagement around it, several organizations have reached out asking specifically to fund those type of projects. And so I was just curious to see if this is something that if you guys are still open and if you feel like this is a chapter you need to just pause right now where you're dealing with some other things.
I think that once we realize what the budget is and also when the 501c3 passes, or whatever the appropriate terminology is for that, then we would be looking into grants, to your point. And so I think that there are monies that are available to us, especially because it's an underserved community.
And I was gonna tell you that next. One of the grants that I know that exists right now for that is actually being handled on the East Cleveland side. And I told them it's absolutely insane for them not to communicate with you and partner to get something done. But I think that we can do some funding. I think that's a great project for the two cities to work on with that. And I think there's some funding on the East Cleveland side you can use. And so I'll follow up with you. I'm sorry. It just so happens she asked you that and it just triggered something in my
I would
head.
welcome that, thank you.
Counselor Pedros.
If I could, question for Myra. So you said that you heard back from Land Studio and they said that they didn't have the budget,
Yes.
I think I heard.
That was a conversation that Rachel had with them.
Okay, so is it the case that if they had more funding, they would be open to conducting that assessment?
That was not part of the conversation. I think right now, because of the work that they're doing on Lee Road, that they just feel that they're up to whatever they
Okay,
can
it's a
handle.
capacity constraint. Okay.
So I just want to be clear.
Vice President Russell.
So wasn't there ARPA funds given to the arts for murals in all the business districts? Am I correct or incorrect?
Okay.
Counselor Cobb.
Here's what happened. We did authorize that money to Heights Arts, and that encompassed them doing art throughout the city. We subsequently did a modified agreement, and I don't know how that exactly came about, that authorized those expenditures to be done in the Lee Road and or Coventry area following an art assessment that was done by Land Studios. And that contract cut out the Noble neighborhood.
Excuse me? This happened when? I'm sorry, I'm just.
Thank you.
This happened somewhere in the contracting process, the final contract between the city and Heights Arts.
Wow.
So is it safe to say that the assessment was done, so are we able to revisit that same
Well,
assessment?
no, there has not been a arts assessment done in the Noble neighborhood. What and this briefly came up during the budget hearing. What I would like us to do is to authorize some money to have an arts assessment done in the Noble neighborhood that was not done. So, and just to set the record straight, Rachel approached me and I was at Music Hop and she said there might be money left over from Land Arts that could be used to do an art assessment in Noble neighborhood. The problem is that Land will not know how much money they will have left over to do that art assessment. Recognizing the urgency to get an art project done in Noble, we can't wait to find out how much money is left.
I would agree with that, cause it's taking everything in me right now not to lose it at this
Counselor Maddox,
table.
Counselor Maddox.
Jesus.
Let me finish if I could. Notwithstanding Land, since that can't be done, I just want to ensure that the Merchants Association is working with an organization that does have expertise in public art projects. And if they have an issue with working with Future Heights, then they need to find another arts organization to work with rather than this just being an internal decision that is made within the organization.
You'll want to for sure.
This is not.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Counselor Pash.
Okay, please
Excuse
remember,
me, I want one council person speaking at one time, please.
okay, please remember, we were all presented with this. This was monies that were held up for many, many, many months in a bit of a dysfunctional ARPA funding process. if we all remember correctly, Heights Arts walked away and said, what we initially proposed, we weren't able to do. There were funds available near the end of the very process, and if I remember correctly, this got in at the very, very last minute, like almost the last day of the year it was approved. But it was done on a rush basis and was done with whatever Heights Arts was able to get accomplished within a limited amount of time. Now, I'm not speaking for Heights Arts at this point, but I think at the time, when we all looked at this, we realized that we may need to put some money into other areas of the city. I think at the time, we were just trying to get the ARPA money spent, and I'm just saying that because I know staff was put in some awkward positions. Heights Arts was very, very disappointed and almost walked away from this ARPA process. And maybe before we get all upset, we ask staff to come back and sort of give us a play-by-play of exactly what happened. I would think in order to right what seems to be a wrong, is we need to try to find some money for art in Noble,
And Taylor.
I can tell you
whatever's missing.
just based on the 7 messages still flying through my phone, there are some stunned residents. Well, number one, we're going to fund something either before I leave here or after, so help me God, I'll come back here to every council meeting in 2026 because we are not giving Noble scraps. This is just another example of why Noble is the way that it is. We get to investment, we're all this commitment, everyone's excited, and then you turn around and somehow Noble always gets bent the hell over. This cannot happen and it won't. I got just a couple of weeks left and you guys can get rid of me, but until I'm gone, this needs to be resolved. We have got to, I am sick and I'm so damn tired of talking about investment and hearing so many people committed to it in Noble. But somehow we keep going and flooding money to Lee Road, Coventry, and every other area of this city. And I'm walking past the same shit every damn year on Noble. This has got to stop. So I don't know what needs to happen, but we need to resolve this because right now we have residents who are sitting on that side of town paying just like everybody else, driving through and looking and expecting the same level of service and they haven't gotten it. And the frustration that you're hearing from me is a frustration you're hearing from every resident on the north side of town. They are fed up. We're sitting here, I'm thinking we're moving past Noble so that we can start talking about development in other areas and start talking about the north side of Coventry and investing that. How in the hell am I expecting residents on the north side of Coventry to trust anything this city says or anyone at this table when we're screwing over Noble right in their face in the middle of this process?
Councilor Maddox,
So-
I'm
so
going to
I-
call Robert's Rules 43.21.
You can call them all you want to, I'll be gone. I don't care. At this point, all I'm telling you all is that
They're
there
not
needs to be a level of
disagreeing with you.
accountability for the
Councilor
Noble
Maddox,
residents.
They are not disagreeing with you. Council is not disagreeing with you.
I'm telling you, I'm not saying that, I'm saying that every single time this happens, we say nothing and we move on. This has happened for years, years. It's the whole reason I ran in the first place. So I'm not waiting for another 4 years for this. This has been
Councilor
happening
Maddox,
10,
Councilor
15
Roberts
years.
Rules
It's how we
43:21.
lost Dennison Pool and all of the
Refrain
services
from
in the first
attacking a
place.
member's motives.
I'm
or
not
professional
attacking any
standing.
member's motives of question. I'm attacking
Maddox.
how this city is operating.
You are not going to get cooperation when you are speaking this way. Please.
There is no cooperation. I need commitment
See,
to
there's you
this city,
attacking
to
our
the
motives.
north side of town that sticks. Period.
We're
Period.
having this conversation
Period,
tonight.
Councilwoman. I understand it. But again, the frustration, this is insane. You have no idea the messages coming through this. People are shocked. You know how many people on that side of town are so excited, telling residents that this is finally happening. And every time they turn around and something is offered, it is pulled back at the last minute and usually in some damn backdoor deal. That's what I'm saying. So I apologize to any resident that feels offended, but you probably don't live on the north side of town if you do.
Excuse me.
This needs to stop.
I take deference at that. I take deference at that. I was not happy when I heard this either. So you're not listening to all the rest of us. Councilor Petrus.
I think I have my hand up.
It was, she's
Vice
absolutely
President
next.
I am very upset. And I'm just saying it because this is the third reading. And we've had millions of dollars pass through this table on first and second reading. Every time we put something on this table for Noble, it's a pushback. Mr. Cobb has had every time is something else need to be added to the contract. Something else need to be done. Something else need to be added to this. Every single time we get here, it's another flaw in the contract where we cannot pass it. This is not right. We've been working on this for 6 years. 6 years. I allocated ARPA money 6 years ago to the Noble area, 6 years. Nothing has happened. Yes, we have 7 council people here. It takes 7 people. Mr. Cobb himself said at the last Planning and Development Committee meeting, anything council want, I will pass it. It's on tape, it's on video. But every time there's something new, oh, you got a Mercedes budget. You need a Honda budget. You need to put in your own money. Because we gotta make sure you ain't stealing. That's the implication. That's what people are hearing. And every time we turn around, there's something else in this contract. 3rd reading. And now we're here today thinking it's gonna be passed, and now we find out something else? And we gave ARPA money for all districts. If the ARPA money and the design for those murals was not going to be placed in Noble area, it shouldn't have been a modified contract. That money should have came back to the city. That money should have came back to the city for those districts that was not getting a mural.
I do have 2 questions. City Administrator Dumas, did you find out about funding this particular piece of legislation?
Yes, the funding for this particular piece of legislation will be a result of a funds swap between the ARPA money that the city transferred into the general fund, and then the general fund will transfer money to the Department of Planning to set up this project.
So money is there.
That's correct.
All right, thank you. I have one more question. Do you have an idea, because in the agreement, the seed money is a blank space. We don't know how much seed money that they're going to get to start off. So does anybody have any idea what that figure is?
That's still to be determined with Myra. But along those lines, Madam President, what I was thinking about just a moment ago was the desire for some assurance on the part of some that, you know, the art installations are appropriate, et cetera. The agreement already, without a Heights Arts connection or a Land Studios connection, requires written city approval in advance of any expenditure over $5,000. So the city would need to sign off on, as I see it, the murals in particular are certainly in excess of $5,000. The artists for summer and winter are in excess of $5,000. All of those things would require advanced written city approval. And so I'm just throwing that out there as a thought that that's already there. Those projects, those purchases can't go forward without the city's approval. And maybe that gives council enough comfort level that the agreement can be adopted in this fashion.
You've plugged every hole you could possibly hole. Every hole that you could possibly plug, you have done it.
Councilor Petrus, one more question, then we have to move on.
I just think that it's worth noting, we have a lot of legislation that comes through. And so I went back to look at what might have brought us here, and it looks like there was a piece of legislation at the end of the year that we looked at and voted on December 2nd. All 7 council members voted for that piece of legislation. That being said, looking at the drafted budget, there is $35,000. So while that Heights Arts updated agreement would provide art to Coventry and Lee Road, this drafted budget provides $35,000 for murals for Noble, provides an additional $30,000 for artists and talent, and has an additional $60,000 for miscellaneous expenses. So I think that there is plenty of funding in this drafted budget to provide robust art for the Noble neighborhood.
Madam President, I'll simply say this to our mayor-elect. You gotta find a way to get this done. Period. Figure it out and start moving funds to the Noble area so they can see real change with this new council. I don't know what's going on, but how this is communicated, how processes have developed in terms of development and change in Noble, has to change. So whatever needs to happen, you guys need to figure it out in 2026, because I'm sick of this.
Counselor Cobb?
Look, I know you don't wanna belabor the point, but what Councilmember Petrus pointed out, and I don't think you were clear on it, all of City Council voted on December 2nd, and it wasn't a first reading, on this Heights Art project that allocated the money away from the entire city. So there was no hidden backdoor deal. Council all voted for it.
We on Counselor
Never mind,
Sheets.
I won't even say a word.
So I'll say this, and to be clear, and I'll start out with, I'm an East Cleveland girl. And I always came up to Cleveland Heights to enjoy my days, growing up. But looking at the budget that was submitted, and these are questions that I have for you, Myra. We're speaking of putting back into the Noble area. If you looked at the amendments, 59,000 was taken from the Noble area, from the actual businesses. Only 10,000 was taken from, 11,000 was taken from the marketing area. Marketing is still receiving $93,000 of this budget, whereas the actual businesses are receiving 36,000. So if we're gonna scream, we actually need to like look at these numbers first.
And how it's been.
Why can't we take from that $90,000 in marketing and put into the area where you can see measurable results for the residents, for the businesses, create some jobs, create some activities for the youth, improve some property values? You're talking about taxes and so forth on. Why are we putting 90,000 in marketing a desert?
Because we've been nitpicking this contract. We've been nitpicking
Vice
this.
President Russell?
Right, but put that money into the businesses and create some jobs, create some economic development. That's what's listed in the agreement and the actual PowerPoint that was submitted stating that was part of the mission. Part of the mission is to create jobs. Get the people outside. Like, we're having art shows. Where? Like, there's no businesses there. Could we provide some micro grants with that 90,000 to the businesses? Could we provide some small loans that can generate revenue that would cover year 3 for the merchants and things of that nature? That's a way to give back and grow the community and feed the community itself.
All that is in line with what the Merchants Association wants to do. They're just trying to get the money that we had allocated from the ARPA funds for them. We allocated that money for them a long time ago. We're just trying to get them that money so they can do exactly what you're talking about. No, they can't do no art shows right there now because there's nothing to give art shows.
Right, I'm looking
But
at
you have to bring businesses there.
I get it, but I'm looking at the final budget. Even the merchant mixer, they're planning on spending $90 in food for merchants. You only think your merchants are worth $90 worth of food? But, you know, we're talking about $5,000 for a website.
What budget
This
you
is the
looking at?
final budget that Myra sent.
Well, they had a larger budget.
Yes, but it was all going to marketing. What are we marketing? We need to grow the community.
I don't think it was all going to marketing.
No, actually, if I can explain.
Yes.
So the overall impression of this budget, the emphasis for the budget is that we want to transform Noble. And in so doing, although it's not listed as a line listing, we are already soliciting new businesses to go into Noble and doing work gratis on that. And the Merchants Association and the people that have been working diligently with me and Councilperson Russell have worked hard to try to get new businesses onto Noble so that we have a merchant mix. And to your point, once we have a merchant mix, then we have something to talk about. So in terms of whether the marketing budget is going to be utilized immediately, it probably won't. Do we have anything to tout for a holiday campaign? Councilperson Cobb has been pushing for that, and I push back every time saying we have nothing to talk about yet. Noble needs to be transformed.
It does.
And the transformation is gonna happen through the legwork that I am putting into this and also the women that are working with me and the board of Noble to try to get new businesses in there so that Noble is more than a place for hair salons, nail salons, and tattoo parlors. We need a merchant mix.
We do.
We're working diligently to make that happen. That is not listed there. To your point, I have been working gratis on Noble for months, 5 years actually with Councilperson Russell. So this is not something that's listed in a budget, but it's something that we are giving of our time to accomplish exactly what you're talking about. So I wish that you had been part of the conversation. I feel obviously, as you know, that it was totally inexcusable that you wanted a lawyer present to talk with me. But on top of that, I think that right now, to Councilman Maddox's point, this is way past due for what needs to happen for Noble.
It
And
is.
I live on the other side of town, and this has been an eye-opening experience for me to see what's happening on Noble and how this council has not stood up for that part of town for many, many.
No,
I'd like
that,
to move on, I'd like to
is
move on, and
absurd.
we
So
have one more.
I will clarify.
Counselor Sheets, please, can you make it brief?
I will. But this is a wide explanation.
Of course.
Anytime someone sends an email and states that they have legal representation and provide that attorney's information in there, you are to cease and desist communication and you are to seek your legal counsel. And that is exactly what I did. Despite your advisement or your imposed instruction for me not to communicate with my legal department, not to communicate with Addie, that will never happen. I will always make sure that I am protecting not just you, the association, the council, myself, and the community at large. I am sitting here as a steward of the Cleveland Heights residents and their funds. I am not going to walk around or move around haphazardly because you sent an email and imposing that I'm going to move when you say move. That does not happen with me, okay?
Excuse me if I
Stop,
may.
we need to move on, thank you.
Please do.
Um,
We'll have a conversation later.
Brian
We will.
Iorio,
Who would
next time. Are you okay with that?
Now would not be the right time for an arbitrary.
On the other hand, it might be a good time, but, all right, I appreciate you being here for us and sitting patiently.
So I have a question for, are we moving this forward today or what are we doing?
That's not a question for me, actually.
Oh.
As far as I'm concerned, it could move forward, but I think council needs to decide if it's comfortable with those two changes that there seemed to be agreement about being made after approval, which I'm assuring you I would do. And then has to be comfortable with the treatment of the arts question and whether the mechanism for advanced written city approval addresses concerns that Councilman Cobb has expressed or does not.
I'm satisfied with that.
I'm comfortable moving it forward.
And just so it's clear, I put these suggestions forward 2 weeks ago at our last meeting. I understand the law director has been out of town and didn't get a chance to get to it. But it's not like this was any last minute surprise. No council members spoke up and said that these were not anything that they could go along with. So I'm not the one holding this legislation up.
So you're good with the RFPs under that purchase approval mechanism and the other two items can be readily addressed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the seed money can be filled in, so when it's signed, the document's signed, it's in there as to in terms of what money
Correct,
they
and it's
will
within
get.
the contours of the overall budget.
Okay with moving forward? All right. Does anybody have other?
Yes, are we gonna get some staff reports tonight? Is there a chance that we could have someone update us on the Thunderbolt situation?
It's going to happen, yes,
Okay.
during the council meeting. With that in mind, I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 7:32 p.m.